I never thought I'd see Ryan again. Not after the way he left. No explanation, just a vague text saying he had to go. That was 2 years ago. I've spent every day since trying to forget him, convincing myself I was better off without him. I rebuilt my life, poured myself into my work, and vowed never to let anyone tear me down like that again. But life has a cruel sense of humor. It was a Tuesday, one of those long, draining work trips that made me regret taking a job with so much travel. I was in a new city, going through the motions of another business meeting. The hotel's conference room buzzed with the sound of people talking, networking, sipping on weak coffee. I was exhausted, distracted, barely keeping up with the conversation around me. And then, across the room, I saw him. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. It had to be a trick of the light. But no, it was him, Ryan, the man who ghosted me without a word, who disappeared from my life like a ghost. He looked different, his once carefree face now marked by a weariness I didn't recognize. His eyes, once so full of life, darted nervously around the room like he was expecting someone, to come for him. He hadn't seen me yet, and part of me wanted to keep it that way. But I couldn't just let him slip away again, not without an explanation. Before I could stop myself, I was walking across the room, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked up at the last second, and the color drained from his face. "Claire," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I hissed, anger bubbling to the surface. "What the hell are you doing here, Ryan? 2 years without a word, and you just show up in the middle of some random business trip?" He looked around nervously, avoiding my gaze. I didn't expect to see you." "No kidding," I snapped. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but something in his expression stopped me. There was fear in his eyes. Real fear. "I can't talk right now," he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. "Not here." I stared at him, my anger quickly turning into confusion. "What's going on, Ryan?" "Please," he whispered, stepping closer. "I'll explain, but not here. Just meet me later. There's a diner down the street from the hotel. 8 p.m. I hesitated. This wasn't the Ryan I remembered. He was always calm, always confident. Now, he looked like a man on the edge of something terrible. My curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I nodded. "Fine, but you're explaining everything." Ryan exhaled, relief flashing in his eyes. "I will. I promise." By the time 8 p.m. rolled around, I was regretting my decision to meet him. I sat at a small booth in the back of the dingy diner, the smell of stale coffee and greasy food thick in the air. My mind raced with questions. What was he hiding? Why had he disappeared? And why was he suddenly so afraid? Ryan walked in a few minutes later, looking over his shoulder before he sat down across from me. He didn't even glance at the menu, just folded his hands on the table and leaned forward, his eyes darting around the room like he was expecting someone to jump out at him. "Okay, Ryan," I said, cutting straight to the point. "What's going on? Why did you leave? And why are you acting like someone's after you?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's complicated." I rolled my eyes. "That's not an answer." He hesitated, then leaned in closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't just leave you, Claire. I left because I had to. I got involved with some bad people, people who don't forgive easily." I blinked, trying to process his words. "What are you talking about? Bad people? Like criminals?" Ryan nodded, his face tense. "I made a mistake. I thought I could get out, but it's not that simple. I've been running from them ever since." I stared at him, my mind racing. "You're telling me you've been hiding from criminals for 2 years? That's why you left?" "Yes," he said, his voice strained. "I didn't want to drag you into it. That's why I disappeared. I thought it was safer for you." "Safer for me?" I repeated, my anger rising again. "You didn't think to tell me any of this? You just left me hanging." thinking I did something wrong? I didn't have a choice, he said, his voice filled with guilt. If they knew we were together, they would have used you to get to me. I couldn't risk it. I leaned back in my seat, my heart pounding. This was too much. Too sudden. Who are these people? What did you do to make them come after you? Ryan swallowed hard. I got involved in a scheme. It started small, just money laundering, quick cash. But I found out too much, got too close to their operation. When I tried to walk away, they came after me. Now, they think I have something they want, information, and they won't stop until they get it. My mind was spinning. The man I thought I knew had been living a double life, hiding secrets that put him, and now me, in danger. I had no idea what to say. I'm sorry, Claire, he whispered. I never wanted you to be part of this. But now they found me again, and I don't know how long I can keep running. I stared at him, my heart torn between the anger I felt for being left in the dark and the concern that had begun creeping in. So what are you going to do? Ryan shook his head, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know, but I'm running out of options. And now that you've seen me, I'm afraid you might be in danger too. My stomach twisted. Danger? What do you mean? If they find out we've reconnected, he said quietly, they'll come after you. They'll think you know something. I felt the blood drain from my face. But I don't know anything. That doesn't matter to them, Ryan said, his voice grim. They'll come after you anyway, and I can't let that happen. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. So what? You expect me to just go on the run with you? Leave everything behind? I don't know what to expect, Ryan admitted, his voice filled with frustration. But I'm running out of options, Claire. I can't do this alone anymore. I need your help. I stared at him, the weight of his words pressing down on me. My mind screamed at me to walk away, to let him deal with the mess he'd gotten himself into. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the man I'd loved, the man who had once been everything to me, couldn't ignore the desperation in his voice. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. What do you need me to do? Ryan looked at me, a mix of relief and fear in his eyes. I need you to help me figure out how to take them down. It's the only way we can both survive this. Would you help an ex who dragged you into their dangerous past? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Things are about to get even more dangerous for Claire and Ryan. I barely slept after meeting Ryan at the diner. My mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, fear, confusion. Part of me wanted to walk away, let him deal with the mess he had created. He had left me without a word, and now he expected me to help him out of a situation that could get us both killed? It was ridiculous. But there was another part of me, the part that had never fully healed from his sudden disappearance, that couldn't let him go. He was scared, and it wasn't the kind of fear you could fake. Whatever trouble he was in, it was real, and it was dangerous. By the time morning rolled around, I had already made my decision. I couldn't walk away. Not yet. I met Ryan at a small coffee shop the next afternoon, hoping for more answers. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were sunken, dark circles casting shadows over his gaunt face. He scanned the room constantly, like a man who had spent years looking over his shoulder. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly as we sat down. You don't have to get involved, Claire. It's not your problem. I didn't want it to be, I said, crossing my arms. But you made it mine when you walked back into my life. And now, if what you're saying is true, I'm already involved. So let's cut the drama and figure out what we're going to do. Ryan nodded, his face tightening with guilt. I'm sorry, he said softly. I didn't want this for you. Well, it's too late now, I replied. Start from the beginning. What exactly are you hiding from? Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes darting to the window before he spoke. It started years ago. I was working for a consulting firm, doing financial stuff. One of our clients was involved in some pretty shady deals, but no one knew at first. They were laundering money through the company, using fake accounts and shell corporations. I found out by accident, and instead of going to the authorities, I thought I could play both sides. I stared at him, my anger flaring again. You got involved in a criminal organization? You didn't think to maybe, I don't know, not do that? I thought it would be quick, he said, his voice filled with regret. I was in over my head before I even realized what I'd signed up for. By the time I wanted out, it was too late. They knew I had access to sensitive information, stuff that could take down their entire operation if it ever got out. That's why they won't let me go. So what's this information you have? I asked. What do they want from you? Ryan's face darkened. I've got files, emails, documents, transaction records. Everything that proves they've been laundering millions through legitimate businesses. I was supposed to destroy it all when I left, but I kept a copy. I thought it would be my insurance, my way out. But now, they think I'm going to use it to bring them down. That's why they're after me. I blinked, trying to take it all in. So, you have the evidence to destroy them, but they're hunting you because they think you'll use it against them? Exactly, Ryan said, rubbing his temples. They've been looking for me ever since. I've been on the run, moving from place to place, but they always find me. And now, they know you're connected to me. My stomach twisted with fear. What does that mean for me? You said they'll come after me. What are they going to do? If they think you know something, they'll use you as leverage to get to me, Ryan said, his voice grim. I don't think they'll hurt you, but they'll do whatever it takes to make me give them what they want. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This was worse than I thought. If Ryan was telling the truth, I wasn't just caught in some personal drama. I was caught in a web of criminal activity that could get me killed. Okay, I said finally. What's the plan? How do we fix this? Ryan hesitated, his eyes flicking toward the window again. I've been thinking about that. I know it's risky, but I think the only way out is to expose them. Expose them? I repeated, my heart skipping a beat. How? Won't that just make things worse? It's dangerous, but it's the only way, Ryan said, his voice firm. If we can get the files to the right people, journalists, the authorities, it'll be too public for them to retaliate. They'll be destroyed. But we have to be careful. One wrong move, and they'll know what we're doing. I swallowed hard. This wasn't some simple plan to disappear. This was a high-stakes game that could end badly if we made a single mistake. So, we're talking about bringing down a criminal syndicate? Pretty much, Ryan said, his expression serious. I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything crashing down on me. I had no experience in this. I wasn't some secret agent or a hacker. I was just Claire, an average woman who had gotten way too close to something dangerous. But I couldn't back out now. Not when Ryan's life, and apparently mine, was on the line. I need help, I said finally. If we're going to do this, I can't do it alone. Ryan nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. Do you have anyone you can trust? I thought for a moment, then remembered a friend I hadn't spoken to in a while, Jordan. He was a tech wizard, a hacker who had helped me out with a few tricky situations back in the day. If anyone could help us gather the evidence, it was him. There's someone, I said. A friend from my college days. He knows his way around computers and networks. If we can convince him to help, he might be able to get us the leverage we need. Ryan's face lit up with hope. That could work. But we have to be careful. They're watching everything. Our phones, our emails, maybe even our homes. You'll need to reach out to him in person. I nodded, feeling the weight of my decision settle on my shoulders. This was real now. There was no turning back. Later that evening, I drove across town to Jordan's place, my heart racing the entire way. If he couldn't help, we were out of options. And if I messed this up, the people after Ryan would come for me next. When I arrived, Jordan was surprised to see me, especially after all these years. But he welcomed me in with his usual laid-back smile. Claire, long time no see, he said, kicking back on his couch. What brings you here? I hesitated, unsure of how much to tell him. But there was no time for half-truths. I had to be honest. Jordan, I began slowly. I need your help with something serious. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Serious how? I've gotten involved in something dangerous, I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. Ryan, you remember him, right? My ex? He's in trouble, and now I am too. We need to bring down a criminal syndicate. Jordan's smile faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. You're joking, right? I wish I was, I said. But this is real. Ryan has evidence that could take them down, but we need to expose it without getting killed. You're the only person I know who can help us do that. Jordan ran a hand through his hair, processing the situation. Damn, Claire. I didn't think you'd show up after all these years asking for something this crazy. I wouldn't be here if I had another option, I said, my voice pleading. Please, Jordan. You're the only one I can trust with this. He was silent for a long moment, weighing the risks. Finally, he sighed and nodded. All right, I'll help you. But this isn't going to be easy. If these people are as dangerous as you say, we have to be smart. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. Thank you. You don't know how much this means. Don't thank me yet, Jordan said, his voice serious. We're about to take on some pretty powerful people. We have to make sure we don't leave a trail. One wrong move, and they'll find us before we can do anything. I nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. This was it. We were really doing this. Would you trust an old friend to help you take down a criminal organization? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Things are about to get even more dangerous for Claire and Ryan. Jordan wasn't kidding when he said this would be dangerous. The moment we agreed to move forward, the reality of what we were doing began to sink in. We weren't just playing with fire. We were diving headfirst into a blazing inferno, and there was no guarantee we'd come out the other side. For the next few days, Jordan worked tirelessly, combing through encrypted files Ryan had stored on a secure drive. The information was a bombshell, evidence of money laundering, bribes, and illegal arms deals. There were emails, bank statements, and even recorded conversations implicating powerful people, some of whom I recognized from the news. This wasn't just a criminal gang. This was a network of high-profile players, businessmen, politicians, and law enforcement. They were all in on it, and Ryan had the receipts. We were sitting in Jordan's cramped apartment, the three of us surrounded by stacks of takeout boxes and empty coffee cups. The air was thick with tension as Jordan clicked through the files, shaking his head in disbelief. This is insane, he muttered, scrolling through the data. If this gets out, it could take down half the city. That's why they're after me, Ryan said, his voice low. They know I have this. They think I'll use it to destroy them. Jordan turned to me, his face grim. Claire, I'm in this now, and I get that. But you need to understand how big this is. We're not just messing with some small-time criminals. These people have connections everywhere. If they find out we're planning to leak this, they won't hesitate to come after us. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I know, but we don't have a choice. If we don't do something, they'll never stop hunting Ryan, and they'll come after me too. Jordan nodded, his expression softening slightly. All right, we're going to do this, but we have to be smart about it. We need a plan. Ryan leaned forward, his face etched with worry. What are you thinking? Jordan pulled up a map on his laptop, outlining the next steps. First, we need to send the files to multiple sources, journalists, legal watchdogs, maybe even law enforcement. We'll use burner accounts and encrypted networks so they can't trace it back to us. But we need to spread it wide and fast. If the story is big enough, they won't be able to cover it up. And what about us? I asked. What do we do while all of this is happening? Jordan hesitated. We disappear. Ryan shook his head. We've tried disappearing. They always find me. Jordan looked at him, his expression unreadable. You've never had someone like me on your side before. I can erase us from their radar, but it'll take time. We have to be careful, or we'll leave a trail. A chill ran down my spine. I knew Jordan was right. This wasn't a fight we could win by going head-to-head. If we were going to survive, we needed to be invisible. The next day was a blur of preparation. Jordan set up multiple layers of security, creating new online identities for all of us. He secured burner phones and encrypted laptops while wiping our digital footprints. I had no idea how he managed to do it so quickly, but it became clear that Jordan was a lot more skilled and connected than I had ever realized. As we worked, Ryan grew more tense. His face was lined with worry, and he barely spoke. I could tell he felt guilty for dragging me into this, and I knew part of him still wasn't sure we'd make it out alive. Every time his phone buzzed or someone walked by outside, he flinched, his nerves on edge. Later that evening, I found Ryan sitting alone on the fire escape outside Jordan's apartment, staring out at the city. The weight of everything we were about to do hung heavy in the air. "Hey," I said softly, leaning against the railing next to him. "You okay?" He didn't look at me, his jaw tight. "I'm sorry, Claire, for all of this, for getting you involved." I sighed, my own fear bubbling beneath the surface. "It's not just about you anymore, Ryan. I'm in this now, and we both need to get out." Ryan finally turned to face me, his eyes filled with guilt. "I never wanted this for you. I thought disappearing would protect you. I thought if I stayed away, you'd be safe." "Well, clearly that plan didn't work," I said, trying to lighten the mood, but my voice wavered. "You should have told me the truth back then." He shook his head. "You would have hated me. I was mixed up in things that could have ruined both of us." I bit my lip, staring out at the dark city skyline. Maybe, but at least I would have known what happened. Instead, I spent 2 years wondering why you left, wondering what I did wrong. Ryan's face softened. "I didn't leave because of you. It was never about you. I left because I was trying to keep you out of danger." "Well, that didn't work either," I muttered, my chest tight. "We're both in danger now." We sat in silence for a while, the city sounds distant and muffled. Finally, I turned to him. "Do you think we'll make it through this?" Ryan hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I think we have a chance. Jordan's smart, and we have each other." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that once this was over, we could start over. Maybe even pick up the pieces of whatever we'd lost. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Too much had changed. We weren't the same people we used to be. "I'm scared, Ryan," I admitted quietly, my voice barely a whisper. "So am I," he said, his hand brushing against mine. "But I'm not going to let them hurt you. Not again." The next few days were filled with constant tension. Jordan worked late into the night, creating an elaborate plan to leak the files. He reached out to trusted journalists and activists, carefully sending out the documents through encrypted networks. The goal was to make the syndicate's corruption so public, so undeniable, that no amount of power could cover it up. But even as we worked to bring them down, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. My paranoia grew with every passing hour. Every phone call felt too loud. Every passing car felt like a threat. Then, one night, everything changed. It was late, and we were still huddled around Jordan's laptop, going over the final steps of the plan. The files were scheduled to go live the next morning, and Jordan had assured us that once the leak hit the media, the syndicate would be exposed. We just had to make it through the night. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from outside, followed by the sound of footsteps pounding up the stairs. My heart stopped. Jordan froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "They found us," Ryan muttered, his face going pale. Without thinking, Jordan grabbed his laptop and shoved it into his bag. "We need to go. Now." Panic surged through me as we scrambled to grab our things. The footsteps grew louder, echoing down the hallway. There was no time to think, no time to plan. We were out of options. "Back door," Jordan hissed. motioning for us to follow him. We raced out of the apartment, slipping through the back exit just as the front door burst open behind us. My heart pounded in my ears as we ran down the alley, the cold night air biting at my skin. I could hear the men chasing us, their voices getting closer. We ducked into a narrow side street, our footsteps echoing in the darkness. My mind was racing. If they caught us now, it was over. They wouldn't just take Ryan. They'd take all of us. Jordan led us to a nearby parking garage, where he had stashed a car. We piled in, breathless and shaking. As Jordan revved the engine, I glanced out the window, expecting to see men closing in on us. But the alley was empty. For now. Where are we going? I asked, my voice trembling. Jordan didn't answer. He sped out of the garage, his face tense. Ryan sat beside me, his jaw clenched, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "We have to get to the safe house," Jordan muttered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's the only place they won't find us." I glanced at Ryan, fear coursing through me. We were running again, but this time, it felt like we were running out of time. What would you do if your life was on the line? Would you keep running, or would you fight back? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Claire and Ryan's story is far from over, and the real danger is just beginning. The car roared through the empty streets as Jordan sped toward the safe house, his face tight with concentration. My heart was still pounding in my chest, adrenaline coursing through me as I stared out the window, expecting any moment to see the headlights of the syndicate's cars bearing down on us. Ryan sat next to me, his jaw clenched, constantly checking the rearview mirror. None of us spoke. The silence was suffocating. "Are you sure they didn't follow us?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. "They didn't," Jordan muttered, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "I wiped our trail as soon as we left the building. But it won't take them long to figure out where we're headed." "Then what do we do?" Ryan asked, his voice tense. "We can't just keep running forever." Jordan glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "We don't have to run for much longer. The files are already in place. Tomorrow morning, they go live. The media, the watchdog groups, the authorities, they'll all have the information. Once it's out, it's too big for the syndicate to cover up." "And what about us?" I asked, my stomach twisting with fear. "What happens when they realize we're the ones who leaked the files?" Jordan was silent for a moment before he finally spoke. "We hide. For a while, at least. Until the heat dies down. Once the syndicate's leaders are taken down, their network will fall apart. But we have to stay off the grid until then." I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. Hiding, disappearing, living in the shadows. It wasn't a future I had ever imagined for myself, but now, it seemed like the only option if we wanted to survive. We reached the safe house just before midnight. It was an old cabin, hidden deep in the woods, far from the city. The kind of place where no one would think to look. Jordan parked the car and cut the engine, and for a moment, the silence was deafening. "This is it," Jordan said quietly, grabbing his bag from the back seat. "We'll be safe here for a while." The three of us slipped inside the cabin, the air inside thick with dust and the smell of old wood. There was no electricity, no running water. Just a few blankets, some canned food, and a lantern that Jordan lit as soon as we entered. Ryan paced the small room, his eyes darting toward the windows. He was still on edge, his body wired from the tension of the last few days. I could feel it too, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The plan was in motion, but there was no guarantee we'd survive long enough to see it through. "Do you think this will really work?" I asked, sinking into one of the rickety chairs by the table. Jordan sat across from me, his fingers tapping on the table. "It has to. Once the files are out, the syndicate will have no choice but to scatter. They won't be able to stop the media storm." Ryan stopped pacing and turned to face us. "And if they find us before then?" "They won't," Jordan said firmly, though his eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. We're safe here. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that once this was all over, we'd be free. But deep down, I knew better. The syndicate wasn't the kind of enemy that let loose ends walk away. The hours dragged by, and eventually, we settled into an uneasy silence. I sat by the window, watching the trees sway in the wind, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. Ryan was asleep on the couch, his face tense even in sleep, while Jordan continued monitoring his laptop, making sure the files were still set to go live. Everything felt like it was hanging by a thread. Suddenly, there was a noise outside. A faint rustling, barely noticeable. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, turning toward Jordan. He frowned, standing up slowly. "Stay here." I watched as Jordan grabbed the gun he had brought with him, moving toward the door with quiet, deliberate steps. Ryan stirred, waking up as soon as he saw Jordan with the gun. "What's going on?" Ryan asked, his voice groggy but alert. "There's someone outside," I whispered, my pulse racing. "I think they found us." Ryan's face went pale, and he stood up, moving toward the door to stand next to Jordan. I felt the cold grip of panic wrap around me, but I forced myself to stay calm. We couldn't lose our heads now. Jordan cracked the door open, peering out into the darkness. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, I saw it. The faint beam of a flashlight cutting through the trees. "They're here," Jordan muttered, his voice tight. My stomach dropped. I had known this was coming, but seeing it now, the reality of it, made my blood run cold. "What do we do?" Ryan asked, his voice strained with fear. "We fight," Jordan said, his eyes hard. "We don't have a choice." The next few minutes were a blur. Jordan moved quickly, positioning himself by the window with the gun. His eyes locked on the approaching figures. I could hear their footsteps now, crunching through the underbrush as they closed in on the cabin. Ryan grabbed my arm, pulling me behind the table. "Stay low," he whispered, his face pale but determined. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I crouched behind the table, my breath shallow and uneven, waiting for the inevitable. And then, all at once, everything exploded into chaos. The front door burst open, and the first man stormed inside, his gun raised. Jordan fired immediately, the gunshot echoing through the small cabin. The man dropped to the floor with a heavy thud, but more were coming. 2 more men pushed through the door, their guns trained on us. I ducked, barely avoiding the bullets as they ripped through the walls. Jordan fired again, hitting one of the men, but the third was still standing. "Ryan!" I screamed, panic taking over as I saw the third man raising his gun toward us. Ryan grabbed a chair and swung it hard, knocking the gun out of the man's hand before tackling him to the ground. The 2 of them struggled, fists flying as they rolled across the floor. I wanted to help, but I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. Jordan fired again, taking down the last man. The room fell silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of the 3 of us. It was over. Ryan stood up slowly, wiping blood from his lip. His eyes met mine, and I could see the relief in them, though it was mixed with exhaustion. "We need to go," Jordan said, his voice shaky. "Now." We left the cabin under the cover of darkness, driving in silence as the weight of what had just happened settled over us. My hands were still trembling, the adrenaline fading and leaving me with the cold realization of how close we had come to dying. But we were alive, and the files were set to go live. By the time morning came, the world would know the truth about the syndicate. The media would pick up the story, and their empire would crumble. We had done it, but as we drove further away from the cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Even if the syndicate was taken down, even if the leaders were arrested, there would always be someone left behind. Someone who would come looking for us. And we would always be looking over our shoulders. 2 days later, the files went live. The media exploded with the story, and within hours, law enforcement was raiding the syndicate's offices. Arrests were made, and the operation was exposed for the world to see. Ryan and I watched it unfold from a small, anonymous motel room, the weight of everything finally lifting. "We did it," Ryan whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's over." But as I looked at him, I knew the truth. It wasn't over. Not really. We had survived this, but we would never truly be free. The shadow of Ryan's past would always follow us, lingering in the background. Still, as I took his hand in mine, I realized something else. We had faced the danger together, and we had survived. Whatever came next, we would face it the same way, together. What would you do after surviving a fight for your life? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. You won't want to miss what comes next for Claire and Ryan.